There are places in the world that do not appear on maps, not because they are hidden, but because they prefer to be discovered slowly. One such place rested at the end of a narrow stone road that wound through quiet hills and silent forests. The road had no signposts, no milestones, only old lanterns hanging from willow trees. Each lantern glowed with a soft amber light, even during the day. Travelers who found the road often forgot how they had arrived, not from magic, but simply because peaceful places ask very little of memory. At the end of the road stood a small village. Its cottages were built from warm gray stone. Their roofs were covered with moss, so soft it looked like velvet. Flower boxes rested beneath every window. Streams wandered lazily between gardens. Tiny wooden bridges crossed the water every few steps. Nothing in the village seemed hurried. Even the smoke rising from chimneys climbed slowly into the sky. The villagers believed that rushing made time feel smaller, so they moved gently, spoke softly, and smiled often. At the center of the village stood the oldest building of all, a round workshop with tall windows that reflected the afternoon sun. Above its wooden door hung a simple brass sign. It read, "The Clockmaker." Inside worked a quiet man named Rowan Hale. No one knew exactly how old Rowan was. His hair had become silver long ago, yet his eyes still carried the curiosity of a young apprentice. His hands were steady, patient, kind. Every morning he polished tiny brass gears. Every afternoon he repaired clocks brought by travelers from distant places, grandfather clocks, pocket watches, mantle clocks, musical clocks. Each one left his workshop keeping perfect time, yet those ordinary clocks were only half of his work. His true responsibility began each evening, just before sunset. Deep beneath the workshop, hidden below a spiral staircase, rested a magnificent machine. No one else in the village had ever seen it. The villagers simply called it the evening clock. It filled an entire circular chamber. Thousands of polished gears turned together in perfect silence. Glass wheels reflected golden light. Silver pendulums swung with effortless grace. Tiny bells chimed so softly they sounded like distant birds. And at the center, a single crystal dial measured something no ordinary clock could measure: the arrival of evening. For generations, the evening clock had gently guided every sunset over the valley, not controlling the sun, simply helping it arrive gracefully, without hurry, without delay. As Rowan often said, even the sun appreciates a gentle reminder. Every evening, exactly 1 hour before sunset, Rowan descended the spiral staircase. He wound the great spring with a polished oak handle. He adjusted the crystal dial. He listened to the quiet rhythm of the gears. Then, he rang a tiny silver bell. Only once. The sound never reached the village above, yet moments later, the sky always began changing. Blue softened into gold. Gold became amber. Amber melted into rose. Rose slowly welcomed the first evening star. It happened so naturally. No visitor ever suspected that somewhere beneath the village, an old clockmaker had helped twilight find its proper place. Tonight, as Rowan finished polishing the final gear, he paused. Something was different. The machine had not stopped. It had not broken. But one gear, a very small gear near the center, hesitated. Just once, then continued turning. Rowan leaned closer. The hesitation lasted less than a heartbeat. Most people would never have noticed. But Rowan had listened to the evening clock every day for nearly 50 years. He knew every sound it made, every rhythm, every whisper of brass against brass. He opened a small leather notebook. Its pages were filled with careful observations written over many decades. He dipped his pen into a bottle of dark blue ink. And wrote it this evening. The clock paused for the first time. The ink shimmered briefly, as if acknowledging the importance of the note. Above him, through the workshop windows, late afternoon sunlight drifted gently across the village. Children laughed beside the stream. Gardeners watered their flowers. A baker removed warm bread from a stone oven. Everything remained peaceful. Yet Rowan looked once more toward the tiny gear. It turned perfectly now, smoothly, silently, as though nothing unusual had happened. But the old clockmaker smiled to himself, not with worry, with curiosity, because after 50 years of perfect evenings, even the smallest mystery deserved a warm welcome. He closed the notebook, placed it gently on the workbench, and reached for the polished oak handle. It was almost time to help the sun set once again. Rowan Hale wrapped his hands around the polished oak handle. The evening clock waited beneath the village. Thousands of brass gears turned together with quiet certainty. The great crystal dial glowed softly. The silver pendulums continued their graceful swing. Everything appeared exactly as it always had. Yet Rowan remembered the hesitation. One tiny pause, so brief it could have been mistaken for imagination. But clocks, especially old clocks, never imagined anything. They simply told the truth, sometimes more gently than people expected. Rowan began winding the great spring. Slowly, one careful turn after another. The mechanism accepted each movement with a deep, comforting hum. The sound filled the circular chamber like distant thunder, softened by mountains. When the final turn was complete, he adjusted the crystal dial. Its clear surface reflected the warm light of late afternoon. The golden pointer rested exactly where it should, 1 hour before sunset. He reached for the small silver bell, lifted it, and gave it a single gentle ring. The note floated upward through the stone ceiling, not as sound, as permission. Above the workshop and the village responded in familiar ways. Shadows lengthened across the gardens. Birds began their evening songs. The breeze cooled ever so slightly, and the western sky welcomed its first hints of amber. Everything was unfolding beautifully. Rowan smiled. Perhaps the tiny hesitation had been nothing more than a passing curiosity. He climbed the spiral staircase, step by step. The scent of cedarwood greeted him as he entered the workshop. Outside, villagers were beginning their evening routines. A woman folded freshly washed linen. An old man rocked gently on his porch. 2 children floated small paper boats along the stream. The village breathed in unison with the approaching sunset. Rowan stepped outside, as he did every evening. He always liked to watch the first colors arrive. The western sky deepened into gold. Golden light brushed the rooftops. The windows glowed warmly. The leaves of the willow trees shimmered like tiny coins. Then, everything stopped. Not dramatically, not suddenly, simply stopped. The breeze no longer moved the leaves. The stream no longer carried the paper boats. The birds held a single note without finishing their song. Even the drifting smoke above the chimneys remained suspended. The sunlight itself paused upon the hills. Rowan looked toward the sky. The sun had not stopped. Time had, or rather, 1 single minute had. The village remained within it. The same minute. Again, and again, and again. No one else seemed to notice. The baker continued smiling at a customer. Though neither moved, the children remained crouched beside the stream, their paper boats forever waiting for the current. A butterfly hovered above a rose, its wings held open in perfect stillness. Rowan reached into his pocket, slowly. His own movements remained possible, only just, as though the minute allowed him to borrow a little of tomorrow. He removed his pocket watch. An old brass watch he had carried since his apprenticeship. Its second hand continued moving. Tick, tick, tick. But the minute hand did not. It rested firmly between 6 and 7, unwilling to continue, unwilling to finish. Rowan listened carefully. The world had become astonishingly quiet, not empty, expectant, as if time itself had paused to remember something important. He opened his leather notebook. The pages turned with unusual resistance, almost as though they too were reluctant to leave the moment. He wrote hands this evening, a single minute chose to remain. The ink shimmered, then spread across the page in tiny silver lines. Not words, not drawings, a map. The lines curved gently, passing through forests, across rivers, over distant hills, until they ended at a place Rowan had never seen before. A small circle, drawn beneath the image of a setting sun. He studied it quietly. The map was not pointing toward a village, or a mountain, or a road. It pointed toward a moment, a place where evening itself had become lost. Far above, the sky remained painted in perfect golden light. Never deepening, never fading, the village rested peacefully inside the endless minute. No one was frightened. No one was aware. They simply existed within a beautiful pause. Rowan closed the notebook gently. His hands remained calm. After all, he had spent his life repairing clocks. Perhaps tonight, he would repair something larger. Not the evening clock, not the village, but time itself. He looked once more toward the motionless sunset. The colors were breathtaking, amber melting into soft rose. Rose welcoming the first violet hints of night. A sunset so beautiful, one could almost understand why a single minute had refused to let it end. Somewhere beyond the western hills, someone or something was holding on to evening. Not out of malice, out of love. And Rowan knew that was where his journey would begin. The village remained suspended within its beautiful minute. The breeze waited among the willow branches. The paper boats rested upon the quiet stream. The baker's warm loaf hovered just above the wooden counter, forever a heartbeat away from being placed into waiting hands. Nothing had become broken. Nothing had become lost. The world had simply paused at one of its most beautiful moments. Rowan Hale looked west, beyond the cottages, beyond the flowering meadows, beyond the gentle hills where the sun lingered patiently above the horizon. The silver lines inside his notebook pointed in the same direction, toward a place no ordinary map had ever shown. He slipped the notebook into the pocket of his long gray coat, then returned briefly to his workshop. There were preparations to make. Not many. A clockmaker never traveled with heavy luggage. He packed only what every careful keeper of time required: his old brass pocket watch, a tiny bottle of midnight blue ink, 3 sharpened pencils, a folded cloth for polishing delicate gears, a loaf of fresh bread from the baker's shelf, who would never know it had been borrowed, and finally, a small wooden box. Inside rested 7 tiny brass keys, no larger than acorns, each shaped differently, each belonging to a lock that few people remembered. Rowan closed the box gently. Every clockmaker carried such keys. Most spent their entire lives without using them. He hoped tonight would be no different. Before leaving, he descended once more to the evening clock. The great machine continued turning, smoothly, patiently. The tiny gear that had hesitated now moved as perfectly as the thousands around it. Rowan placed a gentle hand upon the polished brass frame. "You've done all you can," he whispered. "The rest belongs to me." The machine answered with its familiar, comforting hum. He smiled, then climbed the spiral stairs for the last time that evening. Outside, the village remained wrapped inside the endless golden minute. He walked quietly through the motionless streets, past the silent gardens, past the suspended butterflies, past the old willow trees whose leaves had forgotten how to fall. Beyond the final cottage, The stone road continued westward. Usually it ended after a few miles. Tonight, it did not. The road stretched farther than Rowan had ever seen, as though the paused minute had unfolded hidden distances inside the world. He followed it. The sun remained exactly where it had been, golden, warm, patient. The light never changed. Hours seemed to pass, or perhaps only seconds. In a paused world, such things become wonderfully difficult to measure. Eventually, the hills opened, and Rowan stopped. Before him lay a valley unlike any he had ever imagined. Everywhere he looked, sunsets, not skies, not weather, sunsets themselves, resting gently across the landscape. Golden evenings drifted like mist above the grass. Rose-colored twilight flowed through quiet streams. Amber light hung from the branches of ancient oak trees like ripe fruit. Violet dusk settled softly upon distant meadows. Entire evenings had been gathered here, preserved, protected. The valley glowed with countless endings to countless days. Some sunsets felt young, bright, joyful. Others carried the quiet warmth of late autumn. Some shimmered with the deep oranges of desert horizons. Others reflected pale northern evenings where twilight lingered for hours. Every sunset was unique. Every sunset was beautiful, and every one of them had been carefully collected. Rowan stepped forward. The grass beneath his boots shimmered with golden light. The air smelled faintly of warm stone after rain, and somewhere nearby he heard laughter. Not loud, not playful, content. The laughter of someone happily occupied with patient work. He followed the sound. It led him through rows of glowing evenings, past trees whose leaves reflected every color the sky had ever worn. Until finally, he reached a small cottage. Its walls were built from honey-colored stone. Its roof was covered in flowering vines that bloomed only during twilight. Outside the cottage stood shelves, hundreds of them, and upon each shelf rested glass jars. Large jars, small jars, round jars, tall jars. Every one filled with sunset. Golden light swirled inside them like liquid honey. Rose-colored clouds drifted lazily beneath glass lids. Tiny evening stars sparkled within crystal bottles no larger than teacups. Someone had been collecting sunsets for a very long time. The cottage door stood slightly open. Warm amber light spilled onto the garden path. The gentle laughter came again. Closer now, inside. Rowan removed his hat, smoothed his silver hair, and knocked softly upon the wooden frame. The laughter stopped. Footsteps approached. Unhurried, kind, the door opened. Standing there was a woman with silver hair gathered into a loose braid. Her apron carried tiny flecks of gold and crimson light as though she had been painting with the colors of evening. Her eyes reflected the entire western sky. She smiled, not surprised, not alarmed, simply pleased. "Oh," she said softly. "I wondered when the clockmaker would finally come." The endless minute around the world waited patiently. The jars of sunset glowed warmly upon their shelves, and Rowan realized he had not come to repair a broken evening. He had come to meet the person who had been lovingly keeping them. The cottage door stood open. Warm amber light spilled across the stone path. Behind it, shelves filled with glass jars glowed softly in the endless evening. The silver-haired woman smiled as though Rowan Hale were an old friend, arriving a little later than expected. Not late, simply days on time for this particular sunset. "Please," she said quietly, "come inside." Rowan stepped across the threshold. Immediately, the air changed. It carried the scent of cedarwood, fresh tea, orange blossoms, and the faint warmth of sunlight lingering on old stone. The room was unlike any workshop Rowan had ever seen. Long wooden tables stretched from wall to wall. Hundreds of tiny glass bottles rested upon them, some no larger than a thimble, others the size of lanterns. Each contained a different fragment of evening. One held the last golden ray that had touched a mountain peak. Another preserved the pink glow reflected upon a quiet lake. Another cradled the first violet shadow cast beneath an ancient oak. The colors moved gently inside the glass, never fading, never growing brighter, simply remembering. The woman noticed Rowan studying them. "They settle after a few centuries," she said with a soft smile. The newer sunsets still liked to wander, as if to prove her point. One bottle released a tiny swirl of amber light that floated lazily through the room before returning to its place. Rowan smiled. "I've spent 50 years repairing the arrival of evening." The woman nodded. "And I've spent nearly as long making sure none of it is forgotten." She crossed the room and placed a small kettle over a quiet blue flame. Not fire, twilight. A tiny ribbon of dusk danced beneath the teapot. It glowed without heat, without smoke, only warmth. She poured tea into 2 delicate porcelain cups. The tea shimmered with pale gold, like liquid sunset. Rowan accepted the cup gratefully. It tasted remarkably familiar. "What is it?" he asked. The woman looked toward the nearest window, the last warmth of summer evenings. She smiled. "Steeped with mountain herbs." For a while, they drank in peaceful silence. Outside, the valley continued glowing beneath its collection of sunsets. At last, Rowan reached into his coat and removed the leather notebook. He opened it to the page where the silver map had appeared. The woman studied it, then sighed gently. "It has finally begun. You know about the paused minute?" "I do." She set her teacup down carefully. "My name is Mira. I am not the one who stopped time." Rowan listened. She continued. "I only collect what every day leaves behind." She walked toward a tall cabinet filled with crystal bottles. Carefully, she removed one from the highest shelf. It was unlike the others, completely clear, empty, or so it seemed. She held it toward the window. Within the glass, a tiny thread of fading light appeared, so delicate it almost escaped notice. "The final light of every sunset," Mira whispered. "The very last ray before evening becomes night." She looked at Rowan. "Most people never see it. It lasts less than a heartbeat. But if no one gathers it," she paused, "the world slowly forgets how to end the day gently." Rowan understood immediately. Just as the evening clock guided sunsets, Mira preserved their memory. One welcomed evening, the other remembered it. 2 halves of the same quiet responsibility. She returned the bottle to its shelf, then walked toward the largest window in the cottage. Beyond it, the valley shimmered with countless evenings resting among the hills. "I've noticed something." Her voice became softer. "The sunsets have changed. Not their colors, their endings." Rowan stepped beside her. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward one glowing valley, where a magnificent sunset hung suspended above a quiet lake. "It never finishes." Rowan watched carefully. The golden light remained exactly the same. The shadows did not deepen. The stars did not appear. Evening had become afraid to become night. The realization settled gently between them. Not fear, sadness, somewhere, that the world had begun holding on to beautiful moments just a little too tightly. Not out of greed, not out of selfishness, out of love. The desire to keep what was lovely. Even when it was time to let it pass, Mira folded her hands. "I think someone believes that if sunsets never end, nothing beautiful will ever be lost." Outside, the valley glowed with thousands of preserved evenings. Each one beautiful because it had once ended, each one precious because it had once become memory. Rowan looked at the endless golden sky, then quietly opened his notebook. He wrote, "Beauty is not made smaller by ending. It is made unforgettable." The moment the ink dried, every bottle in the cottage shimmered. Hundreds of tiny sunsets brightened together, not because they were trapped, because they were remembered. A gentle breeze moved through the open window. For the first time since Rowan had entered the valley, one single autumn leaf drifted from a nearby tree. Slowly, gracefully, it landed upon the cottage step. The paused minute had moved, only slightly, but it had moved. Mira smiled. A hopeful smile. The valley is listening. Far beyond the hills, the sun lowered by the smallest imaginable distance. Almost invisible, but enough. Enough for the first evening star to begin thinking about appearing. The first autumn leaf rested quietly upon the cottage step. It did not seem remarkable. A single golden leaf, softly curved, its edges touched with crimson. Yet Rowan Hale and Mira both stood watching it, because it had moved. In a valley where evening had refused to continue, where a single beautiful minute had stretched beyond measure, one leaf had remembered how to fall. Not quickly, not reluctantly, simply, naturally. Mira bent down and lifted it gently. The leaf was warm, still holding the last sunlight of the endless afternoon. She placed it carefully between the pages of a small book resting near the window. "Every beginning deserves a witness," she whispered. Rowan smiled. Outside, the jars of sunset continued glowing among the garden shelves. The valley remained filled with countless evenings, beautiful, patient, waiting, but now waiting with hope. Mira turned toward an old wooden cabinet that stood in the corner of the cottage. Its doors were carved with tiny images of mountains, rivers, clouds, and stars. She reached into a pocket of her apron and removed a slender silver key, no larger than a pine needle. The cabinet unlocked with a gentle click. Inside rested a map, not made of paper, woven from threads of golden light. It shimmered softly as she lifted it into the room. The threads rearranged themselves, forming valleys, forests, rivers, coastlines, and finally, a mountain, standing alone at the very edge of the glowing map, farther west than the setting sun itself. Rowan studied it quietly. "I've never seen this place." "You haven't?" Mira folded the luminous map carefully. "Very few people have." She looked toward the endless sunset beyond the window. "It only appears when evening forgets how to become night." The room grew still. Outside, a breeze moved through the flowering vines climbing the cottage walls. Not much, just enough to remind the valley that change was possible. Mira pointed to the mountain. "Beneath it rests the first hourglass." Rowan looked at her. "The first?" She nodded. "The one from which every clock, every calendar, every sunrise, and every sunset learned how to continue." Her words settled gently into the quiet room. The first hourglass, not a machine, not a clock, something older, something from before people measured time. From before clocks counted it. From before evenings became memories. "It has never stopped," Mira said softly. "But if someone has reached it," she paused, "that might have slowed its turning." Rowan thought about the paused minute, the endless sunset, the valley filled with evenings that refused to end. Everything suddenly felt connected, not broken, interrupted, as though someone had gently placed a hand upon time, asking it to wait. He reached into his coat and removed the small wooden box he always carried. Inside lay the 7 tiny brass keys. Mira looked at them with quiet recognition. "So," she said, "you are truly a master clockmaker." Rowan laughed softly. "I've always preferred simply being a careful repairer," she smiled. "The world usually depends more upon careful repairers." They stepped outside together. The valley shimmered beneath its countless preserved sunsets. The jars glowed warmly on their shelves. The first evening star appeared, not in the sky, but as a faint reflection waiting within the highest glass bottle. The world was trying to continue. It only needed permission. Rowan looked west, far beyond the glowing hills, far beyond the collected evenings, toward the mountain no ordinary traveler had ever reached. He opened his notebook one more time. Its pages welcomed the fading light. He wrote Fethi, "Time does not ask us to hurry. It only asks us to keep walking." The ink settled quietly upon the page. At that exact moment, the endless sunset shifted, almost too gently to notice. The golden light deepened into amber. The amber welcomed the first whisper of rose. Not much, only enough for the valley to sigh. A long, peaceful, Gio's patient sigh. The paused minute had become a moving one. Slowly, very slowly, but it was moving. Mira looked toward the western mountain. The hourglass is waiting. Rowan closed the notebook, slipped it into his pocket, adjusted his old traveling coat, and together, the clockmaker and the keeper of forgotten sunsets began walking toward the last mountain, not to make time move faster, only to help it remember that every beautiful ending is also the beginning of another dawn. Above them, the sky slowly welcomed another color. The journey had truly begun. Rowan Hale and Mira walked side by side. Neither spoke. The valley seemed to appreciate silence. Every step carried them farther from the cottage of bottled sunsets and closer to the last mountain, whose peak glowed softly beneath the endless evening. The path beneath their feet was paved with smooth stones. Each stone reflected a different hour of the day. One shimmered with the pale blue of dawn. The next glowed with the bright warmth of noon. Another held the cool lavender of twilight. As Rowan stepped across them, he realized the path itself was remembering the passage of time, not measuring it, remembering it. The air grew cooler as they climbed. The fields of collected sunsets slowly gave way to quiet forests. The trees here were unlike any Rowan had seen. Their leaves were transparent, like thin sheets of amber glass. When the breeze moved through them, they did not rustle, they chimed. Soft notes drifted through the forest, gentle, patient, like a choir that had learned to sing without words. Mira smiled. The trees of passing hours. Rowan listened. They bloom only where time is healthy. The music soothed him. Each note seemed to ease the lingering tension in the paused world. Far behind them, the valley glowed warmly. Ahead, the mountain rose higher with every step. Its slopes were smooth, carved by centuries of wind and rain. Near its summit, a waterfall descended in complete silence. The water flowed, the mist drifted, yet not a single splash reached their ears. Rowan watched for a long moment. "It isn't silent," Mira whispered. "It simply makes a sound too old for ordinary ears." They continued climbing. As twilight deepened ever so slightly, the mountain revealed a narrow opening hidden behind the silent waterfall. The entrance was framed by smooth white stone. Ancient symbols had been carved around its edges. Not letters, not numbers, spirals, circles, waves, phases of the moon, seeds becoming trees, stars becoming dawn. The language of cycles, the language of return. Mira stopped before the entrance. This place existed long before the first village, long before the first lighthouse, long before the first clock. Rowan nodded quietly. He felt it. Some places carry an age that cannot be counted, only respected. Together, they stepped through the waterfall. The water never touched them. It parted gently, as though recognizing old friends. Beyond it lay a vast cavern. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness. Crystal formations hung like frozen drops of light. A gentle glow filled the chamber, not from torches, not from the crystals, from the air itself. At the center of the cavern flowed a river. It moved slowly, perfectly. The water was unlike any Rowan had ever seen. It carried no reflection. Instead, it carried moments. As it flowed past, he glimpsed tiny scenes within its surface. A child taking a first step. An elderly couple watching rain from a porch. A sailor returning home. A bird building its first nest. None of the moments remained for long. They drifted past peacefully, never stopping, never rushing, simply continuing downstream. Rowan knelt beside the river. He reached toward the surface. The moment his fingers touched the water, he felt neither wetness nor cold. He felt as passage, the gentle certainty that at every moment, whether joyful or sorrowful, was meant to continue flowing. The river was not carrying water. It was carrying time. The river of hours, Mira said softly. It begins beneath the first hourglass. They followed the river deeper into the cavern. The gentle current illuminated their path. Soon they reached an immense circular chamber. There, at its very center, stood the first hourglass. It was taller than the oldest oak tree. Its glass shimmered with every color of sunrise and sunset. Its frame was carved from pale silver wood that seemed almost alive. Within it, golden sand flowed gracefully from the upper chamber to the lower. Not quickly, not slowly, perfectly. Every grain fell with quiet purpose. Every grain became another heartbeat of the world. Rowan smiled. It still turns, Mira nodded. Yes, but look closer. Rowan stepped nearer. His calm expression slowly changed. The hourglass was not broken. The sand still flowed. Yet between every falling grain, there was the tiniest pause. Almost invisible. Almost impossible to notice. But Rowan knew that pause. It was the same hesitation he had heard in the evening clock. The same pause that had stretched one beautiful minute into eternity. Someone, or something, had taught time to hesitate. Not enough to stop, only enough to become afraid of moving on. Rowan looked up toward the glowing upper chamber of the first hourglass. For the first time, he sensed another presence within the cavern. Not threatening, not hidden. Watching, waiting patiently. Someone else had come here before them, and they had left behind more than footprints. The first hourglass stood in quiet splendor. Golden grains continued their gentle descent, one by one, patiently, faithfully. Yet between each grain, there remained the smallest hesitation, so slight that no ordinary eye would have noticed, but Rowan Hale had spent a lifetime listening to clocks. He knew that time was speaking, not with words, with pauses. The vast cavern was silent. The river of hours flowed beside them, carrying moments toward places unseen. A baby's first laugh drifted across the water, then disappeared. The smell of fresh bread, the sound of autumn rain, a farewell hug at a quiet train station, a sailor catching sight of home after a long voyage. Countless moments floated by. None of them lingered. Each accepted its turn. Each made room for the next. That was the river's wisdom. Nothing was lost. Everything continued. Mira rested a gentle hand upon the smooth silver frame of the hourglass. It wasn't always like this. Rowan nodded. I know. The hesitation felt recent, not in years, in feeling, as though someone had only just begun teaching time to doubt itself. He walked slowly around the great hourglass. Its crystal walls reflected not his face, but different seasons of his life. A young apprentice polishing his first pocket watch. A middle-aged craftsman laughing with villagers during the harvest festival. An older man standing alone in his workshop, watching another sunset arrive. The glass remembered everyone who looked into it. It did not show who they were. It showed who they had become. As Rowan completed the circle, he noticed something hidden behind the great base. A small wooden stool, tiny, no taller than his knee. Beside it rested an equally small satchel, a child's satchel. Its leather was worn smooth, its straps carefully repaired many times. Someone had been sitting here, watching the hourglass, for a long time. Rowan knelt beside the stool. Inside the satchel he found only 3 things: a smooth river stone, a feather from a white owl, and a folded drawing. He unfolded it carefully. The paper showed a child's simple picture. A family standing beneath a bright orange sunset. 3 smiling figures, holding hands. Above them, written in uneven handwriting, were 4 words: "Please don't let today end." The cavern became even quieter. Mira closed her eyes. "Oh," she whispered. "So that's why." Rowan understood before either of them spoke again. No one had come here to steal time. No one had tried to stop the world. Someone had simply asked, with all the hope a child could hold, for one beautiful day never to end. The first hourglass had listened. Not because it obeyed, because it understood. Rowan looked again at the drawing. The edges were worn from being unfolded countless times. Someone had carried it everywhere. Someone who feared what tomorrow might bring. A soft sound echoed through the cavern. Not footsteps, a humming voice. A lullaby, barely louder than breathing. Rowan and Mira turned together. Across the river of hours, a small figure stood beneath the crystals. A child, perhaps 8 years old, wrapped in a blue traveling cloak. The child held an old lantern. Its light was gentle, almost shy. The humming stopped. The child looked toward Rowan. There was no fear in those eyes, only sadness, the quiet sadness of someone trying very hard to be brave. "I'm sorry," the child said softly. "I didn't mean to break anything." Rowan's heart became very still. He crossed the smooth stone bridge over the river of hours. Slowly, carefully. When he reached the child, he knelt so their eyes were level. "What is your name?" he asked. "Leora. And you've been here alone?" Leora nodded. "For 3 sunsets." She looked toward the great hourglass. "I only ask it for more time." Her voice trembled. "My grandmother was very sick. The healers said she might not see another sunrise, so she looked down at the lantern in her hands. I thought if sunset never ended, then tomorrow couldn't come." Silence filled the cavern. Not painful silence. Compassionate silence. The kind that allows tears to become lighter. Leora continued quietly. "I didn't want forever. I only wanted one more evening with her." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I thought if I asked nicely, time might wait." Rowan reached into his coat pocket. Not for a tool, not for one of his brass keys. He simply offered his hand. Leora looked at it for a moment, then gently placed her small hand in his. "It wasn't wrong," Rowan said softly, "to want one more sunset." The child looked up. "It wasn't?" "No." He smiled kindly. "It was love." The river of hours flowed peacefully beside them. The first hourglass continued its gentle hesitation. One grain, a pause, another grain, a pause. Mira joined them. She rested a comforting hand on Leora's shoulder. But love, she whispered, isn't meant to stop tomorrow. She looked toward the glowing river. It's meant to travel with us into it. Leora held her lantern a little closer. Its small flame brightened, just enough to illuminate the drawing she still carried. The family beneath the sunset. 3 smiling figures. A moment worth remembering, not keeping. Rowan looked toward the first hourglass, then toward the child. He finally understood. The world had not paused because of magic. It had paused because one loving heart had been afraid to say goodbye. Leora stood quietly between Rowan and Mira. Her small lantern glowed with a soft amber light. The drawing rested carefully in her hands. Its edges had become worn from being unfolded again and again. The picture was simple. 3 people beneath a brilliant sunset, holding hands, smiling. A moment captured by a child who had believed happiness could be preserved if only the day refused to end. The great hourglass continued its patient rhythm. 1 grain of golden sand, paused, then fell. Another grain, paused, then followed. The hesitation remained, small enough that most of the world never noticed, large enough that evening itself had forgotten how to continue. Rowan looked at the child. "Leora?" he asked gently. "May I tell you something about clocks?" She nodded. He smiled. "When I was a young apprentice, I believed a perfect clock never lost a second." Leora listened carefully. "My teacher told me I was wrong." Rowan looked toward the river of hours. "He said a perfect clock isn't one that never loses time. It's one that never stops carrying it forward." The child lowered her eyes to the drawing. "But if tomorrow comes, my grandmother." Her voice faded into silence. Mira knelt beside her. "Tell me about her." Leora smiled through the tears. "She grows jasmine beside our cottage. She always leaves bread for the birds, and every evening we watch the sunset together." She looked toward the paused sky reflected inside the hourglass. "She says sunsets are the world reminding us that beautiful things don't disappear. They simply become tomorrow's memories." Mira's eyes glistened. "She sounds very wise," Leora nodded. "That's why I didn't want the evening to end." The river of hours flowed quietly nearby, as though listening. Rowan reached into his satchel. From the small wooden box, he removed one of the 7 brass keys. It was the tiniest of them all. Its handle was shaped like a falling leaf. He walked to the base of the first hourglass. There, almost hidden among the silver roots of its frame, was a lock no larger than a walnut, untouched for ages. Rowan inserted the key, but he did not turn it. Instead, he looked back at Leora. "This lock doesn't open with a key alone. It opens when someone is ready." Leora looked puzzled. "Ready for what?" Rowan smiled gently. "To let today become part of tomorrow." The child stood very still. She looked at her drawing, at her lantern, at the endless sunset shining through the crystal walls of the cavern. Then she closed her eyes. Very softly, almost too quietly to hear, she whispered, "Thank you for today." The words floated through the cavern like feathers on a breeze. The river of hours brightened. The silent waterfall outside the cavern sang its first audible note. 1 clear drop splashed against the stone, then another, then another. Rowan turned the tiny brass key. It moved effortlessly, not unlocking, remembering. A warm golden light spread through the great hourglass. The pauses between the falling grains began to shorten. 1 grain fell, then another, then another. No hesitation, no fear, only quiet confidence of time flowing as it always had. Outside, the world breathed. The endless sunset deepened. Gold softened into amber. Amber welcomed rose. Rose slowly gave way to violet. High above the valley, the very first evening star appeared. Not hurried, not delayed, exactly when it wished to. The jars of sunset in Mira's cottage shimmered with quiet joy. The trees of passing hours chimed together in the evening breeze. Far away, in the peaceful village, the paper boats began drifting once more along the stream. The baker finally placed the warm loaf into waiting hands. The butterfly completed the gentle beat of its wings. No one knew that time had paused. No one knew that a child, a clockmaker, and a keeper of sunsets had quietly helped the world remember how to continue. Leora watched the colors changing overhead. Tears still rested upon her cheeks, but now they were different tears. Not of fear, of gratitude. She looked toward Rowan. "Will I forget this day?" He shook his head. "No, you'll carry it. The way a lantern carries light. It won't stay today, but it will always travel with you." Leora smiled. A small smile, the kind that arrives after a storm is finally past. She folded the drawing carefully, placed it back inside her satchel, then lifted her lantern. Its flame glowed brighter than before. Not because the darkness had grown, because the light had learned why it shone. The first hourglass continued its graceful flow. Steady, peaceful, faithful. The world was moving once more. And with every falling grain, tomorrow became just a little less frightening. The first hourglass no longer hesitated. Golden grains fell in their steady rhythm, one after another, not rushing, not resisting, simply continuing what they were always meant to do. Time had remembered itself. The cavern felt different now. Not louder, not brighter, just flowing again. The river of hours moved with gentle certainty, carrying its endless procession of moments downstream. A child laughing, a hand being held, a door opening to welcome someone home, a candle being lit in a quiet room. Each moment passed without fear. Each moment accepted its place. Rowan Hale stood beside the great hourglass for a long time, watching, listening. Mira stood nearby, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass walls of the chamber, and Leora sat on the stone steps of the bridge, her lantern resting beside her. She was no longer crying, but she was still remembering. That was how healing often worked in places where time itself had once paused, slowly, carefully, with kindness. Above them, the cavern ceiling shimmered, not with stars, not yet, but with the faint suggestion that night was no longer being held back. Somewhere far beyond the mountain, the world continued its quiet turning. The sun lowered into the horizon, not trapped, not held, simply completing its daily journey. Rowan finally spoke. "Do you feel it?" Mira nodded. "The balance is returning." Leora looked up. "What balance?" Rowan smiled gently. "The one between holding on and letting go." The river of hours glowed softly as it flowed past them. Then something unusual happened. A single moment rose from the river, not downstream, upward. It shimmered in the air like a drop of golden light. Inside it was the image of night, not darkness, night. A peaceful sky filled with stars, quiet rooftops, sleeping villages, dreams forming behind closed eyes. Leora stood. "I've never seen night," she whispered. Rowan looked at her. "You will." The moment drifted higher, passed through the cavern ceiling and vanished. Not lost, released. A long silence followed. Then, somewhere deep within the first hourglass, a final grain of sand hesitated, just for an instant. The last hesitation. Then it fell. The pause was gone, not destroyed, understood. The hourglass now flowed completely. No breaks, no fear, only time being time. Mira closed her eyes. "It's done," she said softly, but Rowan shook his head. "No." He stepped closer to Leora. It's not done, it's begun again. Leora looked confused. Begun? Rowan nodded. The world doesn't restart when time continues. It heals. The cavern began to change. Very subtly at first. The crystal formations along the walls softened in their glow. The river of hours deepened in color, becoming richer, fuller, and far above, a faint light appeared. Not artificial, not magical, natural, dawn. But it was different from any dawn Leora had ever imagined. Because as the first light of morning touched the world outside the mountain, it did something unusual. It paused, just for a heartbeat, not to stop, to acknowledge, as if sunrise itself had arrived at the edge of the world and looked back toward the night it had emerged from. A gentle gratitude passed through the cavern. Mira lifted her gaze. The sunrise is remembering the night. Rowan nodded. Every beginning owes something to what came before it. Leora stood very still. Her lantern glowed softly in her hands. Outside the cavern, somewhere far beyond the last mountain, the first true sunrise in what felt like forever spread across the sky. Gold touched the horizon, then rose, not forgetting the stars that had held the world together while it was dark, and for a brief moment, day and night existed together, not in conflict, but in understanding. The first hourglass reflected that harmony and continued flowing, as it always would. The first hourglass no longer hesitated. It simply flowed. Golden sand moved through its narrow center like a quiet river of light, carrying every moment forward, without fear, without resistance. The cavern that held it felt calmer than it had in centuries, not because something had been fixed, but because something had been understood. Rowan Hale stood at the base of the hourglass, his hand resting lightly on the silver frame. He did not adjust anything. He did not repair anything. For the first time in a very long while, he simply listened. Beside him, Mira watched the river of hours as it wound through the cavern. Its surface reflected countless lives in motion, not frozen, not paused, living, continuing. Leora stood a little farther away, her small lantern now dimmed to a gentle glow, not because its light was fading, but because it no longer needed to hold back the world. It had learned to share it. The child looked up at Rowan. "Is everything going to end now?" she asked quietly. Rowan turned to her, and for a moment he did not answer. Not because he did not know, but because the truth deserved care. Finally, he knelt beside her. "No," he said softly. "Nothing important ends just because it changes." Leora frowned slightly. "But the sunset, my grandmother, I thought..." Rowan gently shook his head. "Your sunset didn't end. It moved." He placed a hand lightly over his chest. "And now it lives here." Leora blinked, then slowly placed her hand over her heart as well. The realization did not come all at once. It arrived gently, like evening arriving, without being forced. Mira stepped forward. "Time was never broken," she said. "It was only afraid to move forward." She looked toward the great hourglass, and fear is something even time can learn to release. A deep, soft hum passed through the cavern. The river of hours brightened, not with light alone, but with clarity. Rowan removed his hand from the hourglass. For a long moment, he simply stood there. Then he spoke. "I came here to repair a pause." He exhaled slowly. "But I think I've been repairing the wrong thing all my life." Mira raised an eyebrow gently. "Oh?" Rowan smiled faintly. "I thought clocks needed to be perfect, always precise, always correct." He looked at the flowing sand. But time was never asking for perfection. It was asking for permission. A quiet silence followed, not empty, full. The kind of silence that understands it has said enough. Above them, far beyond the mountain, the sun completed its rise. The sky was no longer uncertain. It was simply day, and somewhere behind it, night rested peacefully, no longer forgotten. Leora stepped closer to Rowan. "So what happens now?" she asked. Rowan looked at the first hourglass, then at Mira, then at the child, then finally at the river of hours flowing endlessly forward. A soft, peaceful expression settled on his face. "Now," he said gently, "we stop trying to control time and start learning how to live inside it." Mira smiled. "That sounds like a better kind of repair." Rowan chuckled softly. "It is say." He reached into his coat and took out his brass pocket watch. The same one that had once refused to lie about time. He opened it. The second hand moved steadily. The minute hand followed. No hesitation, no pause, just movement. He closed it again, and this time, he did not check it. Instead, he placed it back into his pocket, where it belonged. Leora watched him. "Will you go back to your village?" Rowan nodded. "Yes, but I don't think I'll be the same clockmaker who left it." He smiled gently. "I think I'll be the one who knows time doesn't need fixing anymore." Mira stepped toward the river of hours. It shimmered beneath her gaze. "Then the valley will be safe," she said, "and the sunsets will continue." Leora lifted her lantern one last time. It no longer held a desperate light, only a gentle one, the kind that does not hold on too tightly, the kind that understands. She looked at Rowan. "Will I see you again?" Rowan considered this, then nodded. "Yes, because time doesn't separate us. It connects us." Leora smiled, a real smile this time. Then, slowly, she turned and walked toward the glowing river, not away from them, but forward, into her tomorrow. The river of hours carried her gently along its surface, and as she drifted away, her lantern brightened once more, not because she needed it, but because she wanted it. Rowan and Mira stood together in the cavern as the first hourglass continued its endless, peaceful flow. Above them, the world moved. Below them, time lived. And in between, nothing was broken anymore, only continuing. Rowan spoke one last time, quietly, almost to himself. "I used to think my job was to keep time running." He smiled. "But now I understand. I was only ever meant to help it be gentle." The hourglass glowed softly in response, as if agreeing, as if thanking him, as if saying, "You were always enough." And so the clockmaker returned home, not as someone who had mastered time, but as someone who had learned to trust it. The sunsets continued to arrive, never held back, never trapped, simply passing, as all beautiful things must. Mira continued her quiet work in the valley, collecting what the world was never meant to forget. And Leora carried her lantern into a world that no longer feared tomorrow. Because tomorrow had finally learned how to be kind, and far beneath the last mountain, the first hourglass kept turning. Not because it was forced, but because it had remembered what it was for, to let everything continue, gently, quietly, endlessly.